third graders. Today we're going to read some stories from the kid who invented the Popsicle. This is a book at our school library, so when we get back and after I return it, you can borrow it if you are interested in some other inventions in there. It's a great book for reading about inventions. Unfortunately, we're not able to work on our Rube Goldberg projects at home, but inventions are created to solve a problem. Our problem right now is we're not at school. So what could you invent that could help us out with that? Maybe a high industrial cleaner, maybe something that totally wipes out all germs in the entire school without injuring our classroom animals. Speaking of animals, if you hear a whining, that is my dog. She is super excited because we have some rabbits and squirrels out, and there are leaves blowing around, and since she's old, she thinks those are animals too, so she absolutely will be whining at some point. If you hear thumping, that's Meadow. I brought her home because she can't stay at school by herself for a month. So she's scratching. She's got that dry skin we talked about. And then my son is also doing e-learning, so if you hear some talking in the background or coughing, that's him. So there are no pictures in this book, so you gotta watch me read to you, lucky ducks. So balloons. Toy balloons first came on the market in 1825. Interestingly, they came in the form of a do-it-yourself kit. The kit consisted of glue, a bottle of liquid rubber, and a little syringe. After putting the glue and liquid rubber in the syringe, the plunger was pushed down and a balloon came out the hollow needle-like end. The balloon took 3 or 4 minutes to dry. Then it could be separated from the syringe and the rubber stem tied off to keep the air from escaping. Imagine all the experiments I couldn't do if I had to wait 3 or 4 minutes for a balloon to dry. Oh my goodness. The calculator was invented by a 19-year-old French boy named Blaise Pascal way back in the year 1642. Blaise made it to help his father in his work. The man was a clerk, and all day long he had to do a tremendous number of mathematical calculations. The boy's invention consisted of a wooden box with 16 dials on it. By turning the dials, one could do simple addition and subtraction quickly. Chewing gum. I'm not a fan, but maybe you guys are. For centuries, the Mayans of Mexico chomped on chicle, the dried sap of the sapodilla tree. In 1845, after he was defeated by the Americans in Texas, Mexican General Santa Anna was exiled to New York. That means he wasn't allowed to come back. He had to go to New York and stay there. Like many of his countrymen, Santa Anna chewed chicle. One day he introduced it to the inventor Charles Adams, who began experimenting with it as a substitute for rubber. Adams tried to make toys, masks, and rain boots out of chicle, but every experiment failed. Did he give up? No. Sitting in his workshop one day, tired and discouraged, he popped a piece of surplus, that means he had a lot of it, stock into his mouth. Chewing away, the idea suddenly hit him to add flavoring to the chicle. Shortly, he opened the world's first chewing gum factory. Gum caught on quickly with Americans. Many doctors, however, said it was unhealthy. In 1869, now this was a long time ago, we know now that it doesn't cause this stuff that these doctors thought. In 1869, one wrote that chewing gum would exhaust the salivary glands, that's where your spit comes from, and cause the intestines to stick together. Well, don't swallow it, for one thing, but it doesn't, even if you do swallow it. Despite such weird warnings, people kept chewing. Today, the average American chews 200 sticks a year. Whew, that's a lot of gum. Comic books. Raise your hand if you like comic books. Oh wait, I can't see you. My husband has a ginormous collection, so I know a little bit about comic books. The ancient Romans read comics. Say what? As early as the 1st century, tablets with comic inscriptions were sold in the marketplace of Rome. The first comic book of the kind we know today was published in Connecticut in 1933, entitled Funnies on Parade. It was 16 pages long and in 4 colors. It was not sold directly to the public, but it was issued as a gift premium by such companies as Procter & Gamble and Canada Dry. Now we have comic book movies, comic book marketing, all sorts of fun stuff. Flyswatter. I like this one because a teacher totally invented it. Super smart, you know. Flyswatter. In 1905, school teacher Frank H. Rose of Topeka, Kansas, made a fly-smashing device by attaching a square of wire screen to the end of a yardstick. I have both of those items in my room. Totally could make our own fly swatters. Initially, Rose called his invention the fly bat, but changed it to fly swatter at the suggestion of a friend. The holes in the wire screen were essential because a fly can sense the air pressure of a solid object, such as a rolled-up newspaper, coming at it. Hula hoops. More than 3,000 years ago, children in Egypt played with large hoops of dried grapevines. The toy was propelled along the ground with a stick or swung around at the waist. During the 14th century, a hooping craze swept England and was as popular among adults as kids. The records of doctors at the time attribute numerous dislocated backs and heart attacks to hooping. The word hula became associated with the toy in the early 1800s when British sailors visited the Hawaiian Islands and noted the similarity, that means things that are the same, between hooping and hula dancing. In 1957, an Australian company began making wood rings for sale in retail stores. The item attracted the attention of Wham-O, a fledgling California toy manufacturer. They changed the wood rings to plastic and in January of 1958 introduced hula hoops to the American public. Within 6 months, Americans bought 20 million hula hoops at $1.98 a piece. Teachers use them for various things such as Venn diagrams and targets and all sorts of stuff. Ice cream cone. It happened at the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis, Missouri. One especially hot afternoon, a teenage ice cream vendor, Arnold Fornichow, had so many customers that he ran out of paper ice cream dishes. Desperate, he went to other nearby vendors to see if any might have some spare containers. None did. Thank goodness. But then Arnold happened to pass by a stand where an Arab man was selling zalabia, a wafer-thin, waffle-like confection sprinkled with sugar. The teenager bought a stack of them and soon was selling scoops of ice cream plunked into the tops of zalabia, twisted in the shape of a cone. Cones were rolled by hand until 1912, when F. Bruckman of Portland, Oregon, invented a machine for doing the job. Today, 1/3 of all ice cream eaten in the United States comes in a cone. I especially like the chocolate-dipped ones. Whoever invented that, thank you. Marshmallow. The mallow was one of the most common plants in medieval England, and one variety was so hardy, that means there was so much of it, it's really strong and can withstand weird environments. And one variety was so hardy that it even grew in salt marshes. From the roots of this marshmallow, syrup was extracted that was used in making medicines. According to a medical book published in 1680, it was the remedy for half 100 illnesses. What's half of 100? 50. And maybe if you have an illness, you could say, hey, Mom, Dad, I need a marshmallow, because that's what it says in this book. No, I'm teasing. Don't do that. Early in the 18th century, it was discovered that mixing gum arabic with marshmallow syrup created a soft, puffy, candy-like confection. Soon a substitute was developed from gelatin and sugar. Though the confection today has absolutely nothing to do with the plant, it is still known as a marshmallow. Mickey Mouse, believe it or not, Mickey Mouse started his career as a rabbit in 1927 as Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, to be exact. Oswald was a black rabbit with a white face. Except for the wrong kind of tail and ears, he looked a lot like Mickey Mouse. Because of legal difficulties as to who had the rights to Oswald, Walt Disney decided to change the name and eventually the type of animal. In his studio in Kansas City, Disney had a tame mouse that he had nicknamed Mortimer. Soon Disney was drawing Mortimer Mouse cartoons. However, before any of these were released, the name was changed to Mickey Mouse. Minnie Mouse, with no aliases, that means no other names, was with Mickey almost from the start. Pluto, Mickey's dog, did not make his appearance until 1930 and was originally called Rover. Here's the Popsicle. One day in the winter of 1905, 11-year-old Frank Epperson mixed a jar of powdered soda pop mix and water. Accidentally, he left the mix on his back porch that night. The next morning, Frank found the stuff frozen, with the stirring stick standing straight up. Pulling out the frozen soda pop, stick and all, he realized he had accidentally invented something pretty good. Calling it the Epperson icicle, which he soon changed to Epsicle, the next summer he made them in the family icebox and sold them around the neighborhood at 5 cents apiece. Later, he renamed his product the Popsicle, since he'd made it with soda pop. Potato chips. In the summer of 1853, American Indian George Crumb was a chef at a fancy restaurant in New York. One guest ordered French fries, which at the time were flat wedges of fried potatoes. The man kept sending back his fries, complaining that they were too thick. Annoyed, Crumb decided to play a trick on the guest by producing French fries that were ridiculously thin and crisp. Instead of angry with Crumb's little practical joke, the guest was ecstatic over the browned, paper-thin fries. Soon, potato chips had become a specialty of the restaurant. In the 1920s, a salesman named Herman Lay began traveling the country selling bags of potato chips out of the trunk of his car. Within a few years, Lay was rich, and Americans everywhere were eating the crisp, salty snack that had originated as a practical joke. I have never had a practical joke be that successful. Scooter. The scooter was invented in 1897 by Walter Lyons, a 15-year-old English schoolboy. Since the boy's father did not think the contraption was worthwhile, a patent was never taken out on it. When Walter grew up, he opened a toy factory, Triang Toys. The scooter was the best-selling item. Toothbrush. This is an invention I'm super stoked that it was invented. However, I'm glad that we don't use the same things that it started out with, because, ew. The year 1770 found William Addis serving time in an English jail. One morning he was cleaning his teeth in the way people had for centuries, by rubbing them with a rag. As he did, an idea came to him. He found a small piece of bone and a brush. He bored, that means drilled, tiny holes in one end of the bone, cut some bristles down to size, wedged them through the holes, and glued them in place. When he was done, he had in hand the world's first toothbrush. Soon after being released from prison, Addis went into the toothbrush-making business. The business was an overnight success, and Addis was soon a wealthy, honest man. Hopefully he didn't serve any more jail time. Although if he did, maybe he had other inventions. I don't know. This is the last one I'm going to read. But again, you can pick this up at the Cedar Library. Velcro. How many people have Velcro on their shoes? Not me. But it's on my coat. In 1948, Swiss mountaineer George de Mestral was on an alpine hike. As was often the case for him, he was annoyed by the thistles and cuckleburs that clung to his pants and socks. While picking them off, he suddenly had an idea. He thought it might be possible to produce a fastener made based on the burrs. Mestral took his idea to a weaver in France. Working by hand, the weaver was able to produce 2 strips of fabric, one with tiny hooks, the other with the surface of even smaller loops to be snagged by the hooks. Mestral christened the sample locking tape. Later, for a trademark name, he came up with Velcro. Vel was the first syllable of velvet, was combined with crow, the first syllable of crochet. All right, again, this book is at the Cedar Library. I am bummed I forgot to bring home my book called The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. It is a true story about a boy who needed electricity for his family and was able to create a windmill with things lying around. So I will try to find a YouTube video of someone doing that as read aloud and provide that. And if I can't, then we'll think about reading it when we get back to school. I hope you're enjoying your time off and staying healthy.